It was a cool spring morning in New York City, the kind where the air feels like it's buzzing with possibilities. The NYU Stern School of Business campus was unusually vibrant. Banners hung proudly across the buildings announcing the annual Youth Leadership and Talent Forum 2025, a prestigious event bringing together students, celebrities, and young influencers from across the country. There was an air of anticipation around this year's event, not just because it was Stern's 25th forum, but because Barron Trump, the 19-year-old son of the sitting President Donald J. Trump, was set to make a rare public appearance. It wasn't political. It wasn't flashy. In fact, his participation was low-key, penciled in under the schedule simply as special guest, Barron Trump, creative expression segment. Most attendees expected a casual talk, maybe a few remarks about being a first son or some polite commentary about leadership. But Barron had remained an enigma for most of his teenage life, and now, as a young man studying quietly at Georgetown, he was more of a mystery than ever. What no one knew, not even the event organizers, was that Barron had a secret, a deep, personal connection to music that he had guarded for years. While the world was fixated on his family's political legacy, Barron had retreated into melody, harmony, and rhythm. Music had been his escape, his peace, his therapy through the chaos of life in the public eye. Earlier that week, when NYU Stern's event coordinator, Professor Lynn Whitmore, reached out to Barron's office with a request for a short appearance, it was purely symbolic. Say a few words, shake some hands, take a photo, she told her team. But when Barron personally responded, asking if he could participate in the creative expression session, an open segment typically reserved for spoken word, dance, or music, Professor Whitmore was surprised, even skeptical. She emailed back, "We'd be honored. Do you plan to speak or perform something?" Barron's response was brief, "I'd like to hum a song." Lynn raised her eyebrows. Hum a song? Was this some sort of joke? But after a moment of hesitation, she typed back, "Approved. You'll be scheduled at 3:45 p.m. right after the student jazz ensemble." The day arrives. By 3:30 p.m., the auditorium was packed. The student jazz band had just finished their set, and the crowd had settled back into their seats, sipping their lattes and chatting. The MC took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next guest. Here for a brief appearance in our creative expression segment, Mr. Barron Trump." There was scattered applause, polite but curious. A few students pulled out their phones. After all, it was rare to see any of the Trump children in such a relaxed, academic setting, especially Barron, who was now taller than his father and carried himself with a quiet confidence. Wearing a charcoal blazer, no tie, and a calm expression, Barron walked to the center of the stage. He stood before the microphone and took a moment. Not to wave, not to clear his throat, just to breathe. There was no music stand, no instruments, just him, and a mic. "I was asked to share something creative," he said, his voice soft but steady. "I'm not a trained singer, but there's a tune that stayed with me for years. It helped me through some tough times. I'd like to hum it for you." The crowd sat still, curious, some confused, others already skeptical. What was he doing? Barron gently closed his eyes, and then he began to hum. It started low, almost too soft to hear. A single note, tender, almost trembling. The microphone picked it up delicately and the auditorium fell completely silent. And then the notes began to rise. There was no instrumental backing, no auto-tune, no beat to mask imperfections. It was raw, unfiltered, and pure. But that was exactly what made it mesmerizing. The melody he hummed wasn't immediately recognizable. It didn't sound like a pop hit or a classical tune you'd learn in piano class. It was haunting, cinematic, like the soundtrack to a memory you couldn't place but somehow missed. The cadence floated somewhere between a lullaby and a prayer. People in the front rows exchanged glances. Phones were slowly lowered. The camera flashes stopped. You could hear nothing but that voice. Barron was lost in it. Each note carried weight, not from volume, but from emotion. He hummed like someone who wasn't performing, but reliving. Like someone telling a story that words couldn't contain. A girl in the second row, a senior economics major named Talia, found herself wiping tears without understanding why. The music wasn't sad. It wasn't joyful either. It just was. Honest. Real. painfully beautiful. At about the 1-minute mark, the humming deepened. It wove into minor chords, suggesting struggle. Then, without warning, it climbed into a delicate falsetto, hopeful, soaring, as if it was reaching for something just beyond reach. That's when it hit people. This wasn't just a random tune. It was a story in sound. A journey. A memory set to melody. What no one in the room knew was that the tune had no official name. It was something Barron had begun humming as a child when his family was under siege in the media. When every moment of his life was scrutinized, when kids at school whispered and reporters stalked the gates of his home, music had been his defense. He would go to his room, put on noise-canceling headphones, and hum. He'd walk through the White House Rose Garden or the private corridors of Mar-a-Lago, his lips pressed together, humming that same unknown melody. It was the sound of coping, of escape, of finding identity in a world where everyone thought they already knew yours. Back to the auditorium. The final notes were featherlight like mist at dawn. Barron slowly opened his eyes, unaware that the entire room was leaning forward in stunned silence. He took a step back, nodded once, and began to walk off stage. No bow, no speech, just grace. And then, someone stood. It was Professor Whitmore. Her eyes glistened. She clapped once. Then again. Others began to rise. One row, then two. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet, erupting into applause. This wasn't political. This wasn't rehearsed. It was human. And in a city like New York, loud, fast, and cynical, something about that moment had pierced through the noise. Backstage, Barron quietly sipped from a water bottle. One of the sound technicians, a young guy named Caleb, approached him. "Dude," he said, "I don't know what that was, but it hit me." "That was beautiful, man." Barron smiled and shrugged. "Just something I've been humming since I was a kid." He didn't say much more. Because he didn't need to. The music had said it all. As the applause slowly faded, whispers began to ripple through the audience. "Did you record that? What was that melody? Was that really Barron Trump?" Even the most skeptical attendees, many of whom had shown up for networking, social media clout, or just to say they were there, now found themselves emotionally shaken. Outside the auditorium, a crowd of students and staff had gathered near the lobby screens, which were broadcasting a live stream of the event. Many hadn't even made it inside before Barron performed, and now they were kicking themselves for missing the moment live. Clips started to surface on social media within minutes. One Twitter user posted, "Barron Trump just hummed. No lyrics. Just hummed. And somehow that was the most powerful performance I've seen all year. Hashtag NYU Stern Forum." Another on TikTok. "I came for the business lectures. I left in tears from a hum. What just happened? Flush face purple heart hashtag Barron Trump hashtag unexpected art." The video, which was originally only about 90 seconds long, was looped, slowed down, paired with piano overlays, even remixed with string instruments. But the raw clip, just Barron, one mic, and that intimate melody, began climbing millions of views. Meanwhile, in Washington. Back at the White House, President Donald J. Trump was seated in the Oval Office during a policy briefing. His chief of staff, Amanda Berkman, walked in quietly and handed him a tablet. "Sir," she said, "you might want to see this." Trump raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "What is it? CNN trying to nail me for breathing again?" Amanda gave a half smile. "It's Barron. At NYU." Donald Trump tapped play. For the next 90 seconds, the room was silent. Not even the military advisor across the table dared to move. As the final notes faded and the screen went black, Trump leaned back slowly in his chair. He exhaled long and deep, eyes glistening. "He's got his mother's soul," he murmured almost to himself. Back to Barron. Barron had disappeared backstage after the performance. Not for drama. Not to dodge questions. Simply because he didn't want the moment to be about him. He found a quiet hallway, dimly lit, near a row of classrooms and vending machines. He sat down on a bench, shoulders relaxed for the first time in hours. That's when someone sat beside him. A voice he didn't expect. "You know, I wasn't planning on clapping." It was Professor Lynn Whitmore. Barron turned his head slowly, offering a small smile. "But I did," she continued. "Because you didn't just perform. You confessed." Barron chuckled. "Is that what that was?" She nodded. "Barron, most people spend years in therapy trying to express what you did in less than 2 minutes. That's not music. That's revelation." There was a pause between them, the kind of silence only created by deep mutual respect. "I didn't think anyone would care," he admitted. "Oh, we care," she said. "Trust me. You gave this campus something we didn't know we needed." The aftermath. By the evening, news outlets began running segments. NBC News, Barron Trump surprises NYU with hauntingly beautiful humming performance. The New York Times, from the shadows, Barron Trump's unexpected moment of vulnerability touches thousands. Fox News, standing ovation for Barron Trump, the future of the Trump legacy takes a musical turn? Music professors, psychologists, and even composers started analyzing the clip. There were Reddit threads theorizing whether the melody had origins in classical works or if it was an original piece. But the truth was both more simple and more profound. It came from Barron's heart. 2 days after the NYU Stern Forum, Barron Trump sat in a quiet corner of Washington Square Park watching the water ripple in the fountain. He wore a hoodie and jeans, nothing about him screamed first son. Yet people walking past glanced his way with that curious recognition in their eyes. Not the political kind, the artistic kind. He scrolled through his phone. Video clips of his performance were everywhere. Tens of millions of views. Dozens of languages in the comments. Messages like, "I don't know who I am politically, but I know I needed to hear that today. As someone battling depression, your melody made me feel less alone. My son doesn't speak, but he hums like that. You gave me hope." That one hit hardest. A surprising call. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Barron?" a calm, older voice said. "This is Quincy Adams, Dean of the Juilliard School." Barron blinked. "Hi. I've seen the clip," Dean Adams said. "More times than I'd care to admit. And I know you probably don't see yourself as a musician, but I must ask, have you ever considered composing?" "I don't read music," Barron replied. "Neither did Hans Zimmer when he started," Adams said with a chuckle. "We'd be honored to invite you for a private tour, not as the president's son, as an artist." Barron was stunned. He couldn't even respond. "We'll follow your lead," the dean added gently. "Just know our doors are open." The reaction at home. Later that evening at the White House, Barron sat across from his father at the resolute desk. Donald Trump, still very much the powerful, no-nonsense president, looked at his son with something softer in his eyes, almost reverence. "You know," Trump said, "I've given speeches to packed stadiums, led the country, fired people on TV, but you walked out there, didn't say a word, and made liberals, conservatives, professors, and students all cry." Barron smirked. "Guess we're both performers, huh?" Trump laughed heartily. "Different stages," he admitted, "but same drive. You did something I never could, kid. You made them feel something they couldn't argue with." There was a long pause. "You proud of me?" Barron asked quietly, not out of insecurity, but out of genuine longing. Donald Trump looked him dead in the eyes. "Always have been. Even when you hummed in your room to block out the world. Maybe especially then." Beyond the politics, what happened next surprised everyone, even Barron. NYU, seeing the overwhelming response, reached out to ask if he would return. Not to perform, but to speak. Not about politics, not about privilege, but about expression. He agreed. At the follow-up event, held in a much larger venue to accommodate the crowds, Barron took the stage in a dark blazer and slacks. Still no teleprompter. Still no entourage. He stood behind the podium, took a breath, and said, "I didn't come here to change minds. I came here to clear mine. When I hummed that melody, I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was just letting a part of me out that didn't know how else to speak. If that helped someone else in the room feel seen, then maybe it was worth all the years of being misunderstood." A pause. Then, thunderous applause, not polite, not political. Authentic. Weeks had passed, but the resonance of Barron Trump's humming hadn't faded. At coffee shops in Brooklyn, you could hear college kids gently whistling fragments of his melody. Street performers in the Village began adding the haunting hum into their acoustic sets. Even news anchors, known for their stiff professionalism, would mention it with a wistful sigh. But Barron didn't chase the fame. He wasn't interested in turning the moment into a tour, a recording deal, or a viral brand. He simply let the wave pass, returning to what he loved: quiet walks, sketching in notebooks, and recording little audio clips on his phone, hums he never showed anyone. That was until one unexpected letter arrived. The envelope. It was hand-delivered to the White House. Not printed, not typed. Just simple pen on high-quality paper. The return address: Vienna Boys Choir, Artistic Director. Barron opened it carefully. Inside was a letter written in elegant, looping cursive. Young Mr. Trump. We heard your voice, though it carried no lyrics. We heard your pain, though you never cried. And we heard your heart. Clearly, fully, humbly. We would be honored if you visited us in Vienna this summer. Not to perform, not to impress, but to heal through art and discover what the human voice can truly do when given nothing but silence and space to grow. It was signed simply, Matthias Huber. Leaving the stage and stepping into one. That summer, Barron flew to Vienna with no entourage, no press, no politics. Just him, his notebook, and a dream he didn't know he had until NYU happened. In the warm halls of the historic choir school, he learned how to compose, not just mimic. He learned how to let sadness live alongside melody. He discovered that humming wasn't less than singing. It was ancient, primal, a call to something deeper than language. And for the first time in his life, Barron Trump felt free. A year later, a mysterious video was uploaded to YouTube. No title, no credits. Just a black screen with the date, May 14th. The video faded in to show a small cathedral in Vienna. Soft candlelight. 4 musicians with cellos. 1 piano. And Barron Trump. He didn't speak. He didn't even face the camera. He just hummed. But this time, the hum wasn't heavy. It wasn't sorrowful. It was hopeful. Expansive. Joyful. Like someone had opened a window inside him and let the light in. The final notes faded into stillness. No applause. No explosion of noise. Just peace. The legacy. Back in America, pundits still argued over policies, speeches, elections. Donald Trump was deep into his second term, battling Congress and tweeting in all caps. But every once in a while, someone would bring up that night at NYU Stern. The night when the quietest Trump did the most unexpected thing. He made America stop talking. And listen. Epilogue. At a small high school in Montana, a teacher showed Barron's video to a music class. One student raised her hand. Why do you think it mattered so much? I mean, he just hummed. The teacher smiled, pausing the video on the final frame. Because, she said, in a world addicted to shouting, a whisper can become a revolution.